At the beginning of the 20th century, there was nothing left in either France or Italy of the great romantic ballets, of which Giselle was the apogee. To find a living tradition of ballet, you had to turn to Russia. For more than 100 years, both imperial companies, the Bolshoi in Moscow and the Mariinsky in St. Petersburg, and their schools, had been under the personal protection of the Tsar. All the ballet masters appointed as directors were either French or Italian. The last of these was also the most important, Marius Petipa. Petipa was from Marseille, son of a family of artists, but first and foremost, the child of romantic ballet. In less than 40 years, he had established a genuine Russian tradition which had produced many prima ballerinas. He developed the grand classical style of controlled emotion, a tradition which produced Sleeping Beauty, created in collaboration with Tchaikovsky. But in 1905, Petipa was 80. In spite of his innovations, he and his ballets remained in the 19th century. Audiences were hungry for something new and original, something more daring. Russia was industrializing rapidly and ready to become one of the great European powers. But changes in social and political structures lagged behind, and this provoked tensions which severely weakened the Tsarist regime. The artistic and intellectual climate had never been so dynamic. From the world of the ballet came Mikhail Fokine, a pupil of Petipa, but influenced by the writings of Tolstoy. He did not want ballet to be just a diversion for the aristocracy. He hated the conventions of academic ballet and sought a form of movement in which there was more life. The arrival of Isadora Duncan confirmed Fokine's instinct. Isadora was an American. She abandoned the ballet shoe and the classical disciplines. She drew her models from elsewhere, far away from the territories of academic dance, from the movement of the waves, the friezes of ancient Greece. Fokine, too, was fascinated by the ancient civilizations. However, while he sought to introduce more freedom into movement, he never rejected the classical tradition, and in Les Sylphides paid homage to the star of romantic ballet, Maria Taglioni. Attaching great importance to the design of sets and costumes in his works, Fokine collaborated with the painter Alexandre Benoit. Through him, he would later be introduced to the leading impresario of the age, Sergei Diaghilev. This young man was at the center of a group of artists fighting against the naturalism in vogue at the time. The new modernist trends were as exciting to this circle as their own native Russian traditions, which they wanted to uphold and introduce to the West. This would be Diaghilev's role. Diaghilev had already taken Russian art and music to Paris. He now returned with the dances of the Imperial Ballet. No longer were the sets made out of cardboard, but they were real visual creations. No more full-length ballets, but short pieces, ballets with a punch as Fokine had imagined them. And Diaghilev presented his own Russian Revolution, the Polobzian dances. The dancers of the Mariinsky, galvanized by the creative strength of Fokine and Diaghilev, met with resounding success. Paris had nothing but praise for Tamara Karsavina, for Vaslav Nijinsky, and for Anna Pavlova, for whom Fokine had created the Dying Swan to the music of Saint-Saëns. Pavlova's talent was in adding the art of her soul to French elegance and Italian virtuosity. After year, the miracle was reproduced. Scheherazade, Firebird, The Spectre de la Rose, and Petrushka, which gave final recognition to the music of Stravinsky. The natural language of Fokine was classical ballet, but this language was fed and invigorated by dialects drawn from folklore and everyday life. Inspiration for the final dance of Petrushka came from the coachmen of St. Petersburg, who would clap their hands, stamp their feet, and beat their chests to keep themselves warm outside their carriages in winter. Diaghilev had already revealed the revolutionary choreographic talents of Nijinsky. In the space of 2 years, 3 choreographic works would create an astonishing interlude in the history of ballet, and dance seemed to free itself from the constraints of music. First came L'après-midi d'enfant, where Nijinsky danced a body rooted to the ground, a dance without technical display. as if he wanted to give to the dance his soul, which mere virtuosity constantly seemed to overwhelm. In Jeux, Nijinsky choreographed movement from sport, contrary to the classical technique of which he was complete master. The scandal came with Le Sacre du Printemps, which the press dubbed Le Massacre du Printemps. Stravinsky's music, commissioned by Diaghilev, was impossible to choreograph classically. Nijinsky, powerfully influenced by the rhythmic dances of Jacques Dalcroze, worked with the weight of the dancers' bodies. He turned their feet inwards rather than using the traditional turnout. After 120 rehearsals, the first performance took place on the 10th of May, 1913. Diaghilev approved of the provisional government brought to power in February 1917, but in October, the Bolsheviks rejected him. He would never return to Russia. From now on, he would move continually, from London to Venice, from Paris to Monte Carlo. After Diaghilev's last visit to Russia in 1913, he brought back a young Moscow dancer who would replace Nijinsky, from whom he had abruptly parted. 16-year-old Leonid Massin. Massin, a product of the Moscow school, did not possess the lyricism of Fokine, but had a theatricality which Diaghilev flattered and encouraged. They spent the 4 years of the war together. In Italy, they met the young futurist artists. In Spain, Massin saw La Argentina dancing and studied flamenco, which later inspired him to create the three-cornered hat.
Revista do Cinema.
Sets and costumes. Diaghilev was enraptured by the cubist canvases of Picasso, who was to marry Olga Koklova, a young dancer from the company, on the set of Parade. There was an immediate understanding between the Russian and the Spaniard. Picasso's costumes, conceived of as personalities, became the principal protagonists of the performance. They were the compares who tried to persuade the public to go to the performance. The performance was a complete scandal. That is to say, Paris loved it. Later, Debussy wrote to Diaghilev, "I want you to know of my joy in rediscovering the extraordinary beauty of the Ballet Russe. It seems like an old dream which is beginning again. And it is very tragic because too many horrors have turned our world upside down." In the forefront of Diaghilev's admirers was someone who would also support him financially, Coco Chanel. Chanel represented first and foremost a state of mind, the spirit of the age. Morals and habits were loosened. Chanel invented for a female body, freed of the corset, fluid and loose garments made out of jersey. Paris society was on parade. Paris could dance and show off their legs, provided they were beautiful.
Lors d'avocat des liens, moi je m'en mets bégonia, on dit que j'ai le bel convainc.
The Ballet Russe produced disciples. Notable among these were the Swedish ballet, founded in 1920 by Rolf de Marais. Their leading star was Jean Borlin, a dancer trained by Fokine. Just like the Ballet Russe, they risked a juxtaposition of form and a combination of different disciplines. Satie composed their last fireworks piece, Relâche. René Clair shot his second film, Entr'acte, with them, a surrealist fantasy where the poetry of movement was interwoven with the movement of the city streets. But Diaghilev remained the leading light of the international stage. Despite this, Massin left him. He left in 1921 to form his own company. Diaghilev brought in Bronislava Nijinsky, Nijinsky's younger sister, to replace him. She shared with the impresario a keen awareness of the spirit of the age, a sensitivity to the times. Diaghilev had asked for a new libretto from Cocteau. "Surprise me, Jean," he said. Cocteau offered him Le Train Bleu, and Chanel designed the costumes. Diaghilev seemed indefatigable. He was at once a discoverer of talent and their essential link with the outside world. He drew Miro into his circle, and then Max Ernst. Diaghilev, a notorious scandal maker, was outmaneuvered by the surrealists. Flirting with communism, they were spoilsports at performances of the anti-Bolshevik Ballet Russe in the pay of the decadent bourgeoisie. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union saw the beginning of the repression which anticipated the Stalinist terror and led to large-scale emigration. Among these exiles were the poet Boris Koshno, the dancer Serge Liffard, and the choreographer George Balanchine. All were welcomed by Diaghilev into his company. In fact, Diaghilev had never broken links with the artistic potential of his country. He sought out the Russian painters Gabo and Pevsner for the stage design and the costumes for La Chatte. He commissioned Prokofiev to write the music for Pas d'Acier, a work on Soviet Russia in which he collaborated again with Massin. Nijinsky had already choreographed Nos, inspired by the constructivists, to a score by Stravinsky with set designs and costumes by Goncharova. But Diaghilev was becoming exhausted. In his notebook, Liffard wrote, "Dance is becoming alien to him. The discovery of a rare book matters more to him than the premiere of a new work. Our family is falling apart." In 1929, the entire program of the Ballet Russe was by Massin. It would be their last tour. On the 19th of August, 1929, Sergei Pavlovich Diaghilev died in Venice. His funeral was held in the cemetery on the island of San Michele. The Ballet Russe died with him. An era had come to an end. With the exception of Nijinsky, who was now insane, all who had once formed part of the Ballet Russe continued to work throughout the world. In France, Boris Kochno wrote down the scenarios of the ballets and acted as a consultant to several companies, and Serge Liffard, appointed head of the Paris Opera Ballet, would reinvigorate a company stultified by an academic discipline. Diaghilev used to say of the dancers Anna Pavlova and Olga Spasitseva that they made up two halves of an apple. Olga, he would say, was the half facing the sunlight. This half, Liffard invited to Paris. Liffard had a definitive style, a balance between the daring breakthroughs of the Ballet Russe and the slightly stiff elegance of the Paris Opera. In the Diaghilev tradition, Liffard continued to work with painters and composers, but the dance was always supreme. fairly far, Picasso created the sets for the ballet Icar. At the same point in time, England was a country still